So today, we will talk about BDD and particularly about how to write better BDD scenarios. So I hope that some of you have already experienced with BDD. So how many of you know or heard about BDD? Very good. This is what I expected. How many of you are practicing BDD? Very good. So basically, this is what the agenda will be. Let's see about our timing. So I will just give a very, very, very short introduction to BDD. I think it's 3 slides, and it will not take more than 5 minutes. And then we jump into a little bit more interactive part. We will do an exercise about reviewing scenarios and learn about some good and bad practices for writing BDD scenarios. And then we will, at the end, we will try to even write a few scenarios together. Let's see how this works with these around 200 people who are here in this room. So we don't have too much time. Let's jump into the middle. So as I said, I would like to make a very, very brief introduction to BDD. And basically, if you have maybe did a little bit of research of BDD, then you probably have found a couple of definitions about BDD, but there is not really a good definition about BDD. Especially, you will find very much the kind of that if you are anyway practicing BDD and you read that definition, that you say that, yes, this is what I'm doing. But if you're not doing yet BDD, then sometimes these definitions are not so good. I'm still struggling with making a good definition of BDD. This is not a definition, actually. What you are seeing is more like a description about what are the most important characteristics of BDD. So at least in my view, behavior-driven development is about understanding and validating business requirements through illustrative examples. So basically, what it is about is how to better understand what we need to do, how to even verify that what we are implementing is fulfilling those requirements. BDD is mainly focusing on business requirements. There are a lot of other requirements as well, but BDD's primary target are the business requirements. And altogether, illustrative examples are the tools that are helping us with that. You will see it in a second. So, and if you practice BDD, then you will see actually that there are 3 sorts of activities that are typically integrated into the development cycle if you are doing BDD. The first is what we are calling discovery. This is about the gathering the details of the requirements, how to better discuss the requirements, how to better understand the requirements, and how to make a shared understanding of that. The second activity that you might need to do, or that you need to do, is document those findings and writing down those examples into a form that is better surviving the time. This is typically where the BDD scenarios, the give and then based steps are introduced. And after that, typically these scenarios are automated and they become an automated test at the end. So this is actually the third activity. So today we will talk about formulation. We will talk about how to write good BDD scenarios, not saying that the other 2 are not interesting, but this is the focus of this particular workshop today. So if you are trying to formulate a BDD, an example and trying to make it a BDD scenario, then something like that will come out. So a scenario which has different steps, typically introduced with this give and then keywords. So basically, it's something that you can write it into a file, you can check it into your source code, and at the end, you typically run it as an automated test, which is good, but this is typically what misleading the people a little bit. Typically, when people see such BDD scenarios or try to practice such BDD scenarios, especially together with tools like Cucumber or SpecFlow, then typically what people see that this is a test. This is an automated test, which is not bad. This is an automated test, and this is what we will use to verify our system automatically. But a BDD scenario is a little bit more than an automated test, and this is very important to understand the core concepts of BDD. The first and most important thing is that, and we will not see this today, but this is part of the discovery process, that whenever we are collecting these requirements or these scenarios are representing our shared understanding. So basically, they are illustration for the requirements that we need to implement. Obviously, they are also serving as automated tests. So this is what is typically quite clear. However, there is even a third aspect of that, which is maybe not so easy to see immediately, but in long term, this is a huge value, because if you are practicing an agile process, I mean, some people are even saying that in Agile you don't need documentation. Probably you have heard about this, which is obviously not true, right? But if you are practicing an Agile process, then you will see that it's not so easy to come up with the right documentation, which is not an extra effort, which doesn't get outdated and really supports your team. And basically what we can see that these scenarios, especially if you have many of them, they are also serving as a documentation, and they will be part of the documentation of the detailed decisions that you have made, the detailed analysis you have made about the project. So this is basically how you should see a scenario. And yeah, so basically this is it. So let's do some work now and let's see how this works in practice. And this is basically leading me to the first exercise. So this will be an interactive session, which means that all of you have got some such a workbook. If you don't, then don't worry. Anyway, we will work in pairs or 3 people mini groups. So you can just find someone who is close to you and have a workbook. So basically what we will do the first exercise now. And in the first exercise, what we're going to do, we will try to learn a little bit about good and bad practices for writing BDD scenarios. And typically the best way to find especially bad practices is to review someone else's code, someone else's scenarios. So the blaming culture is something that we will try to build up now. Just joking. So in your workbook, you will see 3 scenarios. And what I would like you to do with your pair or with the people sitting next to you, go through these 3 scenarios and try to read them and try to understand them and try to verify that or try to analyze those scenarios. Basically, you can just even collect things that you like in those scenarios or don't like in those scenarios. But in the workbook, there are also some motivation questions that you can also think about. So is it clear what the scenario is describing? Are there too many or too few details in your opinion? Does the language that the scenario is written is something that everyone understands? And how likely this scenario will change if the implementation is changing? So basically, these are the questions that you can think about, but also you can think about any other aspects as well. So we will do a timing for that, and probably you will not be able to review all of the 3 scenarios. I will give you 7 minutes now. But just as a group, as a whole team, we will review all of the scenarios. Let's make some kind of randomization. So if you have found your pair, just think about a number between 1 and 3, 1, 2, or 3. And don't start necessarily with the first one. Just pick randomly. I mean, it will be typically a pseudo-random, actually, but doesn't matter. Randomly one scenario to start with. Start with those scenarios. You can also make notes in your workbook. And once you are finished with the review of that, or you think that you covered everything, you can move on to the next one. Move on to the next one, and let's see how many scenarios you can review within the given time frame. Is the exercise clear? Okay, so let's get started. So you have 7 minutes and review the scenarios. Do it in pairs or 3 people groups. Let's stop the discussion in this form, and let's try to discuss your observations, your comments, your notes together. We will not have a chance to put the microphone everywhere where you are sitting, so you have to basically shout your things, your observations to me, and I'm trying to repeat it so that everyone is hearing that. So so let's look at these scenarios one after the other, or at least one by one, and let's start with the scenario A in the beginning. So the scenario A sounded like username should be unique. Given a user Marvin is in the database, and I navigate to http://myapp.com, and I click on register, and I fill in username with Marvin, and I fill in password with 1234, and I click on submit registration, then validation summary should be visible, and validation summary should contain username already in use. So this was the scenario. I hope who was reviewing this one from the group? Okay, many of you. Good. So what were your observations? What kind of things you liked or you didn't like in this scenario? Yeah, somebody should shout in. So you like that it's concrete and you can really imagine how this will flow step after the other. Too much details. In which sense? Could you give? So for example, the URL, for example, what you are saying, right? So probably these username labels here and password labels, probably these are related to the actual UI or maybe even just the ID of the text box on the screen.
I believe there should be a when right away after the given because we are having user actions instead of having condition section.
Okay, so basically what he was saying that right now it looks like that we have a given and then and finally we have a when. And basically his suggestion was that maybe it should be given a user Marvin is in the database when I navigate to, or so somewhere the when should start somewhere earlier than this.
We were thinking that the when should come when I fill in the username, when I fill it with Marvin, and the next step should be that it contains the username already in use. So the other steps, that password and so on, we don't really need it because we are checking that the username is unique or not.
Okay, so that's an interesting observation. So basically what he was saying is that actually, I mean, definitely the password is not really important in this scenario, right? Because we are talking about the uniqueness of the username. So what is the password of the user is not really relevant here, right? Why do you think? Why is it in this scenario still?
Because it would error out on a different message.
Yeah, because if you don't fill out the password, you just get a mandatory field or whatever. You have to have a password, right? So it looks like that, so this was, since the password was a mandatory field, we had to write it in, because otherwise we are not really able to get to the right error message that we wanted to test.
But I would declare Marvin as a variable instead of Marvin.
Would you? Why?
Because I just like going with variables all the time, because even given a user Marvin exists, you know, I would use that as a variable in the end.
And how would you call your variable? So basically you would say given $capital user underscore name exists in the database. Okay, that's a very interesting experiment that you can see. But basically what we wanted to say with this BDD, with these BDD scenarios, is that we wanted to make it clear what is the expected behavior of the system. And now we have to see that what is helping us better. Seeing a username, so just to get to have a feeling, what does that mean that the usernames should be unique? Should they be unique in a case-sensitive way? Should they be unique in a case-insensitive way? What happens with leading spaces? What happens with trailing spaces? Right? But if you just see a variable that like user underscore name there, probably you will not have these questions. Okay? So variables and programming languages are great for programming. Right? But what we are trying to do here, we are trying to declare what is the expected behavior of the system. Okay? And for that, sometimes having concrete data there is helping us to try to imagine what does that mean to be a username. Okay? That was a very good point, by the way. What do you think about the language of this scenario? So someone was saying that it was quite straightforward. Do you think that it was easy to understand?
It's very technical.
It's very technical. How do you see that? Who
cares about validation summary? What is this?
Who cares about validation summary? Yeah.
I would have called it something like notification or something, not validation.
So maybe it's a concept of a message that we give to a user, and technically it's now implemented with probably a UI div which has the ID validation summary, but this is just an implementation. This is just a technical detail, as you were phrasing. When we are looking at scenarios like that, and we are trying to see the language of that, one of the other things that you can consider is just look at the verbs that it is using. So look at the verbs. It says navigate, it says click, it's fill in, visible, contain. What are these verbs coming from? It's a UI domain, right? So actually, it looks like that this scenario is phrasing the thing in the UI domain. Why? But and this is the problem is that the UI, in our case, because we are building a system which happens to have a web UI, but actually the username uniqueness is a business rule, right? It doesn't matter whether you are just enforcing it on the UI. It doesn't matter whether you are enforcing it on the mobile interface or your web API. Username uniqueness should behave the same way. However, this scenario is trying to phrase it in the solution level. And what do you think? What are the danger in explaining this in the solution level?
Forget to do it in the APIs.
Maybe you can forget to implement it on the API or on the mobile app, or we have to make a duplicated test for that, or duplicated scenarios for that. What else is dangerous in this? The UI is changing all the time, or at least it's much frequently changing than the business logic is changing. What else? Actually, the thing is that you were mentioning that the password 1234 is not relevant here, right?
And it is because of password security minimum requirements.
There are behavior which are describing the password security, but not this one, right? So we have scenarios which are talking about how secure the password should be and whether 1234 is a valid password or not. But in this scenario, we are only interested in the username uniqueness. So we would like to hide that from here. However, since our language is the browser language, browser doesn't understand about our default passwords or default field values or default registration details. If you are phrasing the scenarios in a low solution level, then basically you cannot apply such kind of default behavior just to be able to make your point much more focused. Okay? And the problem is that, and this scenario is, by the way, representing the #1 trap that people are running into if they are trying to apply BDD. Because this scenario, if you are seeing it from the automation perspective, if you see this from an automated test perspective, this is the automation heaven. Because basically what you want, to be able to automate this scenario, you just need to automate a couple of steps or keywords. So you need to automate how to click on something, how to fill in a password, and how to navigate to a URL. And you can automate everything. All web applications on the world, practically. So this means that initially it's very easy to get to some kind of quick win. So automating the first scenario just takes maybe half an hour. But the problem starts if you have hundreds of such scenarios. Because what you will see at the end, that you will just constantly maintaining this, because everything will be brittle, everything will be constantly changing, and basically you are implementing a kind of testing depth into your system. What we would like to do, and you have heard that from the other scenarios, other sessions as well, automated tests should support us, not hold us back. So the trap is that since the problem is that people, if I would phrase these scenarios in a database language, for example, if I would say that given I create a new record with these field members, everyone would have said that this is bad because this is not our language. Right? But unfortunately, even though that right now we are implementing a system where username uniqueness is a business rule, everyone in the room is a little bit of a browser expert as well. So we know how browser works, we know how to click on a button, we know how to fill in a text box. Therefore, we kind of understand this scenario. Everyone can understand this scenario, but unfortunately we are understanding it in the wrong level, too low level.
Excuse me, I want to ask if the word should be in this test scenario.
Good question. I come back to that in a second. Okay. So solution level language is generating a lot of noise, like what you see in the password, for example, and it makes the scenarios much more unmaintainable. Okay. So let's say that we would like to fix this. So how would the scenario look like if you would fix that? Someone is volunteering for rephrasing that in a more businessy language. So this scenario, how would you phrase it not in the browser language, but somehow in the domain language of our own business?
Given Marvin has already registered or has registered to our system, whatever, when Marvin attempts to register again, he is refused with a message username already used, if the message is ignored.
Very nice, very nice. So my take is very similar to that. So given a user, Marvin is already registered or registered, you see the difference. So here we were saying that is in the database. That's the technical implementation, but the point is for us not whether it's in the database or not. Because maybe today we are using a database, tomorrow we will use open authentication or something else, right? But the point is that there is already a user registered with name Marvin, and then I say we are attempting to register as Marvin, then the registration should fail because or with that reason or something like that. Okay? So basically, this is rewriting the same scenario in the business language. And this is now using our verbs which are existing in our own domain. So registered, somebody is registered is part of our domain. Register as a verb is also part of our domain. Failing a transaction with some reason, this is also part of our domain. This is not any more solution details. Okay? And the thing is, what you can see here is that we started to discuss about where the boundary between a given and a when should be. But actually, as you see, this question doesn't really make sense at all, because if you see it in the user's perspective, then the action, the triggering action that is triggering this outcome that we expect to see from the system is anyway one step. Okay? So, and here we just had this many and step, and this is why we were confused. Where is the boundary between when, given and when? Because it was just explaining it into too low level. Okay? But if you want to get a rule about where is the boundary between the when and the given, then the rule is that the when steps are representing the triggering action. So the action which is triggering that behavior, in this case, that I'm attempting or trying to register as Marvin, this is the triggering action in this case. Let's answer this should question. So oh, this is not what I wanted to press. So there is this should in the then step. Let's make a voting. Who is a little bit disturbed or who is feeling bad a little bit about the should word there? Okay. Who is fine with the should word? Okay. So as you can see, it's a kind of half-half. There is a little bit of story behind this should word. So behavior-driven development was, this name was given by a guy called Dan North. And basically, he started BDD by trying to make a better automated test, better describing or self-describing automated test. And by doing that, actually, he wanted to promote or focus more on the discussions about the expected behavior. And what he found is that using the should word to state your expectations is a little bit making the thing a little bit more negotiable in a kind of a discussion. Okay. So this is why in many examples that you will see in BDD and many teams who are practicing BDD are using this should construct in the then step. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use that. Typically Dan North was an English native speaker, and probably for him or for native English speakers, the word should has a little bit of more richer meaning than for us who are probably learned about should as a part of a technical language, as a part of an RFC or whatever other kind of specification where it was saying that if I say should, this means an optional feature, right? And if I say must or have to, then it's a mandatory feature. For us, probably the should word might be a little bit misleading. That's all good. So basically what we have to find a consistent language that how we want to use. If we are happy as a team using the should word there and nobody is confused about that, then we can use the should word. But if you feel that this is more confusing in your domain, in your situation, then you can rephrase it with other ways as well. So you can say that the registration fails, so the is formula, because, or the registration must fail, or you can use other kinds of phrasing for that. The good thing is if you are having a consistent phrasing. So if one scenario in your project uses should, the other is using the is, the third one is using the must, and it's a full mix, then probably it's harder to make any kind of consensus there. Okay. Any other comment on this scenario? Let's move on to another one, and I not would do the scenario B, but let's jump to the scenario C just to confuse you a little bit. So basically, scenario C sounded like that. Client receives order notification. Given I visit pizza shop site, Geek Pizza Shop site, and I browse for margarita pizza, and I add the pizza to the basket, and I proceed to checkout, and I enter delivery address, and I enter payment details. When I confirm the order, then I should receive an order confirmation. Who was reviewing that? Okay, so it looks like that our random was not working perfectly, but yeah. So what were your comments on this? So what were your observations? Yeah?
The eyebrows for margarita is absolutely unnecessary.
Uh-huh.
Because it doesn't matter what is in the basket.
It doesn't matter what is the name of the pizza that is in the basket. So a little bit similar like to the 1, 2, 3, 4 password that we have seen in the previous scenario, right? Actually, the behavior should be the same, probably, even if I'm putting a barbecue or whatever else pizza to the basket. Yeah, makes sense? What else? Yeah.
So the all ends are kind of unnecessary. You just need to order any pizza and then confirm it and then get an order confirmation.
So,
So where should you get it? I think the order confirmation on an email or on the screen.
okay, so basically these are two comments. I think both of them are very good. So basically what she was saying is that these many end steps sounds like unnecessary. It's a little bit also not really relevant, right? I mean, just to whether we are getting a confirmation or not, the payment details, address, all these things are not really interesting for this, right? On the other hand, what you were saying is that maybe what I would be a little bit more interesting for me is how that confirmation is working, whether it's an email, SMS, or whatever else. So maybe we want to see more details on that part, right? Okay. For this later on, it's very hard to answer because unfortunately we just see one scenario of the many. So we would need to see the context of that. I absolutely agree. If this would be the only scenario which is talking about the notification or the confirmation, then we would probably want to see more details. But maybe there are other scenarios as well. So this is something that we cannot judge right now. But the other problem is definitely a valid one. So it looks like that all these different steps that we are having here are not really necessary.
Why not just have it like given a customer order the pizza?
Given a customer order the pizza. So probably the reason why this has happened like that was that to be able to, so actually what we want to do, we want to make some, check some behavior which is happening at the last step of this ordering process, when you see the final screen and say confirm. This was something that we wanted to test. However, this is a kind of wizard system that you typically know from the web shop. So to be able to get to the confirmation step, you had to enter your payment details, because otherwise that next button didn't work. And to be able to enter the payment details, you had to enter a delivery address. But unfortunately, you could only enter the delivery address if you were first saying proceed to checkout. But if your basket is empty, you cannot proceed to checkout. So that's why you had to add the pizza to that. But to be able to add the pizza, first you had to find the pizza to be added. So actually, this is the kind of a dependency chain that was built up here. So. But still, we feel that these things are not really important here. So what would be another option for that?
Me personally, I do not like the delivery address is entered, also the payment details there should be is accepted.
Maybe even, yeah?
Can't we just assume that we are already in the payment details? So start from there. And if we know that there's a dependency between these steps, we can only get here if all the others have been done.
That's a very good point. So actually what we have seen in the first scenario, when we were saying click here, click there, navigate here, fill out the text box, basically that was a kind of imperative style. It was telling us what to do. Do this, do that, right? And we also said that this was using a kind of a solution language. The language of this one is a little bit better. So if you just check the verbs that we were saying, browsing for a pizza, adding it to the basket, proceeding to checkout, entering delivery address, these are all part of our domain. So it's not the solution language, but still, we feel that it's, instead of declaring what is our expectation, which is, our expectation is that, let's imagine that we are already at the last step of the ordering process, right? Instead of that, it's just telling us how to get to there. You see that it's starting to be in the same imperative style, it's telling what to do to be able to get there. And the problem is that we might have many scenarios that are dealing with this part, but how to get there has to be repeated in many cases to be able to test all that behavior beneath or after the confirmation step. So basically what we will have many scenarios where these steps will be basically copy-pasted everywhere. So this means that if there is a small change in the workflow, like you have to accept the terms and conditions, again, you have to maintain all of your scenarios, even though that this has nothing to do with the terms and conditions. Yeah?
Put it in the background.
Sorry?
Background? Make it a cumulative keyword, given whatever until I get to the confirm.
Yes, that could be maybe a solution for that. So to be able to make that, to hide these details, we need to rather say it in a declarative way, say what is our expectation, and then in the automation layer, where we have much more options of reusing code, inheritance, many other things, loops and whatever else we want, we can better solve this. So this is basically would be my take on that. So given I'm at the confirmation step of the order workflow, when I confirm the order, then I should receive an order confirmation. So that could be an alternative to that. So instead of saying how we are getting there, we should declare what we are doing there. Yes, there is just for someone was mentioning the background syntactical element in the feature file. There is a syntactical element in such files where some kind of common steps you can put out to the header of the file. But I think in this case, having such a high-level declarative step is a better solution, because this kind of construct can be happening in multiple files as well. So again, when step is typically used for declaring what is the triggering action. All of those other things are also actions to be able to get to our preconditions. That's why they are phrased as a given. In this case, the triggering action is really when you are finally pressing the confirm button there, when you are confirming the order. That is triggering the behavior that we wanted to check. And the behavior, what we wanted to check is whether you get a confirmation or not. Okay? Good. Okay, so I still want to reserve a little bit of time for writing scenarios. So let's just a little bit fast forward what will this scenario be. Probably when you have reviewed, who has reviewed the scenario B? So probably some of you were just mentioning things like that maybe this is too high level, we don't know about the details of how, what does it mean to receive a confirmation and all these things. That's something that is what we have seen also in the previous scenario. We don't know because we don't see the context here. However, the key problem with this scenario, and I don't know whether any of you have spotted this out, is more related to these three then steps. So actually what this scenario is doing, it's declaring three outcomes, three expectations, and three independent outcomes, more or less, for the same triggering action. Right? So in this case, this scenario is basically supporting three business rules. One business rule is that whenever I successfully change my delivery address, I should receive a confirmation. The other business rule is that whenever this happens, then I should that my estimated arrival time should be updated. And the third one is that the delivery person should be also notified. And if you think about these three outcomes and how you would implement these, you would even see that these are probably totally different modules of the system. So they are totally independent from each other from the business rule point of view. The only thing what is common in these is that they are triggered with the same action. Okay? And typically people are trying to optimize the things that, okay, instead of making three scenarios, what would be probably the right solution for this one, they want to just merge it into one, because it looks like that now it will be faster in testing and the automation will take less time and things like that. But what I want to say is that be careful with these kind of optimizations. They are not necessarily altogether paying off what you wanted. Maybe you win a few minutes in terms of automation time, but you are losing a lot in the maintenance time. And also it's very important to say that this scenario cannot be implemented in a test-first manner. So you cannot just first implement the test and the code, because you would need to coordinate three teams. So if you're writing such kind of scenarios, basically it's something like showing in a big message that we do test after. Okay? I mean, sometimes we need to do test after, but at least we don't want to cut the chance of doing it test first.
I had one question. In the first scenario, you gave the user's name, Marvin, but in this scenario, we don't actually specify an address. When do we decide when to give an actual physical address?
I think the answer is that depending on whether it supports us or not. So, for example, if I would like to discuss about the business rule whether if you are changing your order and you are changing the address from one district to the other, then probably it would be interesting to see how a district is calculated, and probably there I would use more concrete addresses. Or if you want to just say one city to the other, maybe the city would be enough. Here in this case, that was not important for us. So, but I think it's a good point. So depending on what you want to have the focus on, different things you might want to make it more concrete or less concrete.
Thanks.
Okay. So in your workbook, basically you will see a set of checklists. You don't have to look at it right now. I have reworded them a little bit just to make it better understand, better rememberable. So basically the things that we have seen here was that in order to get good scenarios, we would like to use the business language instead of the solution language. We would like to use real data to make it better understandable. And for that, for example, the Marvin was a good example. We would like to have our scenarios somehow interesting, not just a test about registration, but we want to have a good reason for that. So, for example, that we want to check the username uniqueness with that scenario. We only want to keep essential or important details in that, and for example, not the 1, 2, 3, 4, what the password was. And generally, we would like to make our tests more focused, that they should only focus on one particular business rule. So this makes this, if you just read up the initial letters of this says brief. So generally, what we want to have, we would like to make our scenarios more brief, more declaring what our expectations are, and not just telling how the different steps should be done. Okay, so we have 9 minutes. So in these 9 minutes, we can make a little bit of experiment. So now you have seen some good and bad patterns. What you can do now, you can practice a little bit how to write scenarios. Basically, on the second page, you see a couple of examples that we have collected during our discussions, during our discovery phase. Basically, they are about a particular aspect of an address changing. So in a pizza shop, you can only change your address before the delivery person has picked the order up. Basically, for this business rule that you see here, we have collected 3 examples. You can read up these examples. Together with your pairs or with the 3-people group, try to pick one of these 3 and try to phrase them into a given when then based scenarios. There are some space in your workbook. I hope you have pen, because unfortunately I cannot feed you with that. Try to phrase a given when then based scenarios for one of these 3 examples that you see here. So I know that 5 minutes is not that much to write a proper scenario, but maybe at least you started to have a kind of thinking and discussion about how those scenarios would look like. Right now, we will not be able to review each other's scenario, but what you will get, and this is something that you get on the slides, are some examples, some potential variations of how these examples could be formulated. So, for example, for the positive case, when we say that the delivery address can change if it's not picked up yet, then we could phrase it in a way that given a client has placed an order and the order is ready and waiting for pickup, then when the client tries to change the delivery address, then it should be accepted. Maybe that could be a way to phrase that. For the second one, where there are a little bit for the negative case, where we would like to reject the change. Basically, we could use the same language more or less, given the client has placed an order and the order has been picked up and on the way. When the client tries to change the delivery address, then it should be rejected with some kind of message like please call the operator for the address change, and the error should contain the operator's phone number. Now, what you can see here is that there are 2 then steps, and I was saying you that you have to be careful with many then steps because they might relate it to different outcomes. In this case, the 2 then steps are actually related to the same thing. It's just the different aspects of this message. So this is not necessarily a problem. So there is no such hard rule that you should only have a single then step. It's more like the opposite, that if you have many dance steps, you should see whether these dance steps are really related to each other, they are really just details of the same business rule, or they are totally different things, just combined with the same triggering action. Okay, so this is might be something that is tricky, and I think the third one was when there is a special case when user has started to change the address, but while thinking the order was picked up. Maybe this is more like a special case from the workforce point of view. You will get the slides, you will get the slides in the PDF, so you can study these examples. But even during the break or in the remaining days of the conference, if you just come to me and show me your scenarios, I'm happy to have a discussion with you about that. Okay, so with that, I would like to finish up the workshop. So basically, we have seen that the BDD activities are the discovery, formulation, automation. We were practicing the formulation part, not saying that the others are not important, but this is what our focus was today about the, as a kind of key message. And this is what you will see when you practice. There is no perfect scenario. There are always things that you can make better or slightly different. Our goal is to generally to find some kind of phrasing which is supporting us, which is making us comfortable as a team. We have a book about the discovery session that we haven't seen. And basically with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I hope that you get some hints out of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.